We didn't know who was going to protect us, how things were going to unfold. I mean, we gathered to talk to one another in our production team. Half Yard Production was a wonderful production company locally in Bethesda, but they had never encountered anything like this in their life, and this was their first time out working with Bravo. So they were kind of, as confused and startled as we were that all of these, they were filming things like Say Yes to the Dress, for goodness sakes.
Right. Low stakes.
Please. So, and you go from that to Housewives of D.C. So it was startling, and it also was concerning for my business. I felt like, oh my gosh, I've got all these people to protect that we represent, and it just felt like it could be detrimental in a lot of ways.
I want to gab. Okay, today we're gabbing with Lynda Erikiletian, one of the stars of the Real Housewives of D.C. As you probably know if you're listening to this show, I recently rewatched D.C. for the first time in 14 years since it aired, now that it's available to stream for the first time on Peacock. And I'm thrilled to have Lynda, one of the breakout stars of the show. I have to say, truly, if I didn't even know her, she would be one of my favorites. And so I'm thrilled to have Lynda on. I so appreciate you coming on and taking the time to do this, Lynda. How are you today?
Gibson, thank you. Thank you so much for the honor of joining you on your podcast. I'm doing great. It's, another busy day.
Yeah, I love how busy you after all these years, you're still hustling away, and I love that. I think you and my mom are both in the fashion world in DC, which is a pretty small world, and I think it's you kind of run that world a little bit. I think it's so cool that you're still going with the agency.
I love your mom. She's just been so incredible. We have been fashion group members for probably over 30 years. And yeah, I love your mom, and you're right. It's a very small industry. And, for those of us who are part of it in DC, we are grateful to have each other.
Good. Yeah. I told her last night, I was talking to her on the phone, and she was like, Lynda, one of my faves forever. So she's excited that we're jumping on this call together too.
Great. Please give her my love.
Of course, I will. Okay, so I told you, you listened to my interview with Mary. I just did that with her a month ago. It came out a couple days ago. And we had chatted the day after you two had kind of reconnected with Andy at his big book event in DC. What was that like for you from your perspective?
It was so exciting. I love Andy. I've always loved Andy. And the timing of it was almost aligned in the stars. It was incredible to go, I guess I didn't live on streaming with Peacock on the 15th. And I think his book signing was the following week. So
Amazing.
it was really, really cool. I loved seeing him. Yeah. And Mary and I, being together and, being in the green room with him. And it was great.
What do you talk about with Andy when you have like a run-in like that?
It's so fast, because he's getting ready to go on stage, and it was really what I wanted most of all was a big hug. Like I missed my big bear hugs from Andy. So, we talked about how things were going, and he had he had like a lot of excitement about the fact that DC was finally getting its justice for its show, and that Bravo was also receiving justice for the show. So I think we were all extremely excited to be together.
That's good. I feel like hearing that also, he said on his radio show, he said in several places, I think since DC went on Peacock, that, he did fight for a second season, that he did really believe in that show. And that must feel really good or almost kind of healing to hear that from him after all these years.
Well, he always loved DC. Like DC is one of his favorite cities, and he made that known. And I just don't think anyone could have seen what was happening or foreseen what was going to happen, and there had never been a show that didn't come back.
Hmm.
So even with all the craziness, I kept thinking, oh, they'll just recast and carry on. But wow, that
Right.
was a shock.
Right. Right.
Not to come
Okay.
back.
Okay. So Linda, let's rewind. Let's rewind the
Okay.
tapes.
Okay.
Probably 15 years back to the beginning. I want to hear about how you got cast on the show. Like who reached out to you? What reservations did you have, if any? What was that part of it like for you?
Well, I had, I think, different people coming up to me like, oh, I think there's something going on in DC, very hush hush, but your name has come up. And how do you feel if someone approached you to do a reality show? And I'm like, what kind of a reality show? And they're like, can't talk about it. So for me, I had watched Project Runway, which I absolutely loved, Top Chef, like all the
Yeah.
fun shows.
Right.
And somebody said, well, it's rumored to be a Real Housewife show. And I was like, I've never seen one. I mean, come on, like,
Right. Right. And,
not
and
that
those were
there was
early
anything
days
wrong
too.
with a Real Housewives show. It's just, for me, I have at that time, that far back, I still had three children at home.
Hmm.
I have four in total, three stepchildren. I had a lot going on, but most importantly, the business that I run was a constant besides my family. So I don't have a lot of time to watch television. So when I do, I usually binge watch. So I
Right.
think Housewives taught me how to binge watch. But so I immediately went to television to see New Jersey. So we
Okay.
all know what happened then. I was
And
like,
that's the
well,
table flipping
no.
years, the Danielle Staub. Yeah, that's wow.
It was, well, the one I was watching was just what was on TV. It
Yeah.
just was the only thing I could pull for reference. So I was kind of taken back that it was even happening in DC because I was like, oh no, we are so different. Like that'll never happen.
So buttoned
And
up. Right.
just we're so much more conservative and I think poised
Hmm.
until, of course, you watch our season and then you'll see just how crazy we all get, right?
Hmm.
So the thing is that that's kind of how it unfolded for me, was just dipping my toe in the water and talking to the casting people and what it would entail and how much time it would entail. And just went through the system. And once they selected their cast, then it was time to get down to contracts. And that took a little bit of time because I wanted, I had a few asks
Hmm.
and they honored that.
Okay. Was that about pay, basically? How much?
No, I really wasn't that interested in what they were paying first season
Hmm.
because I looked at it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to do was protect my family. Like I had
Okay.
said to them, you don't have to be on till you're comfortable being on. Like it's all up to you. They've agreed that it'll be focused mainly on myself and the business and the industry and our charities. And that was a big thing.
Yeah,
So
that's important.
that was an ask. And the other ask was because of my history with the Salahis, and we'll get more into that, I'm sure. I had requested to not film on their properties, not film in places that wouldn't authentically be true to me.
That's
So they agreed that, I mean, there, of course, it was like, well, will you film if they're at somebody else's party, like Paul Wharton's birthday party? I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be a bitch about it, but I don't want to come off as being inauthentic. And everyone knows that we had a difference. And because of that, I just needed to make sure that was part of the contract.
I think that was really savvy of you, Lynda, and I'm not surprised at all. But yeah, I think that's really interesting to hear. So obviously, you had this history of the Slahis, but would you just like kind of run through the cast and just talk to me about who you had met before and who you had maybe heard about before, and maybe what some of your first impressions were once you figured out who was actually going to be filming with you?
I knew Mary, and we had worked together. Her charity Labels for Love was something I always attended, and just loved her. Had never met Stacy or Kat. And Michaela, I had known, I guess I should call her Michaela at this point, but it's so hard for my brain.
I mean, there's like five
Um,
different names that we heard that she had gone by, so whatever works for you.
so, I had met her years ago, actually at a hair salon. We were both getting our hair done. And it was kind of love at first sight. Like we hit it off, we laughed, we talked about everything in the city. I mean, loved her.
Hmm.
And I think the feeling was mutual. And so we remained in touch. At that time, she had been engaged to someone in Pennsylvania and she lived here. And we, discussed how that was going to work out. And then fast forward years of like running into each other, seeing each other at events. She meets Tark. And, I met him. I thought he had a live personality. They both seemed very happy. And I was extremely happy for them. So they started doing a fashion show the night before the polo event that he orchestrated
Right.
in DC, or I don't even know where it was actually, out in Virginia, I guess. Yeah, I went out there once
Okay.
or twice. So, but it was a cool event, and the models all wanted to be a part of it. And so it originally was structured that they would get tickets, complimentary tickets, and could hang out at the polo match the next day. And so in the beginning, when Michaela was putting together the fashion shows, it was just really exciting and fun. But
Yeah.
then after a while, it was like, okay, you've got to pay the models. Like they don't want coupons to go to the polo match tomorrow. They really, is it a match or a game?
It beats me.
Sorry. But anyway, so it was like, yeah, so I said, we really need to pay the models. And long story short, we billed them. They weren't paying the models. I definitely don't think Michaela had anything to do with billing and receipting and all of
Mm-mm.
that. I think that was Tark and his secretary. And so after a while, the models were collecting money on their behalf as an agent, right? And so after a while, I'm being hounded, rightfully so, by talent who expect to be paid. So I had to send a letter, ended up going as far as the legal letter to collect.
Hmm.
So having gone through all of that, we distanced ourselves from one another.
That makes sense. So was that just like a couple years before the show, basically? Was that
It probably within, let's say, 4 or 5
okay?
years
So
prior
pretty
to the
fairly
show.
recently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, and it makes sense that I think your hesitancy about filming at their properties and things like that is valid,
Well, you
given that
start to
experience.
see, it's like honesty is to me one of the greatest virtues. And if they had just been honest and said, hey, Lynda, we know we booked 18 of your models and we owe each of them, it's like I feel that we're having financial issues. Is there something, can we do it over a time, like
Like a
do it
payment
over
plan
time?
almost. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is kind of a boring
No,
conversation
but
for our
they
audience,
couldn't be.
but
No, I don't think so. I think it really adds color to why you kind of started off hesitant about them, And I think that like some of your other cast members were willing to give them more of a shot, particularly Stacy. So I think that your reservations about them knowing this is very are very valid, and we didn't know any of this on the show. Really, you never got to tell this story on the show, so I think it's good to hear.
True.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, of course. So Lynda, so the show captured you at a time when you said, you had three kids living at home. You had another kid, you have stepkids, you were living in an apartment in Georgetown, but thinking of moving out to McLean, the suburbs in Virginia. You were dating a man named Abong, you were running your business. You had a lot going
Mhm.
on. You really did. You really did.
I
What,
did. Yes.
I mean, I'm sure a lot has, but what are some of the biggest changes in your life since that time?
Well, right after we found out that we weren't going to be filming, I was informed that my mother had a level 4 cancer.
Mm, so
So
sorry to
for
hear that.
me, it was, thank you. I mean, she's in heaven. She watches over me every day. Um, so I kept thinking to myself, what would be happening right now if I had to film? Like I would have to share all of this very private, personal things. So there were a number of days that I was grateful that I had not committed to showcasing my life, because I am a very private person who became public, but in my heart, I like to remain private.
Right.
So my mother, we went through that, and really, I moved into my house in McLean, and my friend Deborah Coxstein was the decorator. So she came in and we did everything we could to, bring it up to what I felt would be a home. And I just, I lived there for a while and I loved it. And then all my kids went to college, and it was just me, the nanny, and the housekeeper, and Ichiban and Bonbon. So that's
Huh.
my cat and dog. And I thought, this is kind of crazy. My nanny had been with me though for like 28 years. So
Wow.
she was welcome to live with me forever. But she decided to retire and go back to Buenos Aires. And it just became clear to me that I needed to then shift my life yet again. So I moved back into an apartment where I felt secure and less maintenance.
Right.
And besides that, the business, of course, like many during COVID, was really tough. We went dark for 10 months.
Wow.
And during that time period, there's a big agency in DC, I'm sure you had heard of, called Central Casting. And Dagmar, the owner, and I had worked on projects together because we had models, they had actors. When we had clients that needed something we each had, but we didn't, we would basically split fees and work together. And so Dagmar was calling saying, we've got to meet. I'm 77 years old. Can't see myself coming back from COVID. I really, really, really want you to buy Central Casting. So I'm thinking, we're sitting in the dark. Like we have no business whatsoever. We're just working on, you know, trying to figure out how to get everybody back to work in a
Right.
safe way. And she's like, we're still doing feature films. We're still doing voiceovers. We have, because you have big unions, you've
Right.
got people that are going to put everything in place. And so, the more I thought about it, I thought this is actually perfect,
Perfect.
because a lot of our models now were doing acting. Like, so they were crossing over, and a lot of the TV commercials, they wanted beautiful models, but they wanted models that could speak. So anyway, it became a perfect partnership, and took about 4 months for us to acquire them. And our first film out of the gate was with Denzel Washington directing A Journal for Jordan.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was amazing. It was, Michael B. Jordan was the actor who was playing in the movie.
I
It
remember
was
that
very,
movie. Yeah.
yeah, very cool. So we continue to do that and do voiceovers and TV commercials. And fortunately, fashion is back. Like, we're doing runway shows again. We're doing
Awesome.
informals. The designers are coming back. Like, we just did a beautiful show with Saks Fifth Avenue and Carolina Herrera, where everything went to Children's Hospital. It was amazing. So yeah, we're
Wow.
back.
What a cool way to also just kind of unexpectedly have to kind of adapt and shift and learn probably a lot about, I mean, because you had worked with central casting, but you also probably had to adapt a lot and learn a lot about that business when this happened. And like, what a cool, I mean, that's just a cool learning thing, I think. And then you just have a bigger business now, which is a blessing. So everything happens for a
Such a
reason.
blessing. Yeah, such a
Yeah.
blessing because I mean, it actually is quite magical now because everything is like one industry.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm
Everybody's
loving it and
a
I'm
multi hyphenate.
learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, I'm still learning, but I have like such a great team, and Dagmar introduced us, to people that could also help advise, and she's like a phone call away. So I'm feeling really blessed about that.
Good.
And
Good.
yeah,
Good. Well, Lynda, on the show, I know you said that you are, more naturally a private person, but again, upon rewatching it, you remember how much you really had a knack, I think, for being a housewife when it comes to, I mean, you were so quick. You had all these one-liners. I mean, the quote to me, I mean, I hadn't watched the show for 14 years, but the quote to me that I always would think about was you calling it a goat rodeo. And that was one of the most iconic lines of the whole season. I mean, you had that line, your tagline was really memorable. At the reunion, you say to Michaela or Mikhail, the only MS you have are your initials, the rest is BS. You were very quick, and I think that is a really landmark quality in a housewife, I think. And so I'm curious, like, it seemed like you still, even though there was a lot of darkness around the show and there's a lot of drama, it seemed like you still had some fun in those moments and using your smarts in that way.
thank you, Gibson. I had a blast. I had a blast. I learned all about like what it's like to do television, what like working with producers, watching, just it was amazing. It really helped me actually on the central casting side of things.
Right.
But I had a blast. I loved meeting Kat and Stacy. And I mean, it was it was a lot of fun, and I was very disappointed when we weren't picked up for a second season because you get into such a mode of you're used to people following you around, and they ask for your calendar, and they really look at what you're doing and then what they want to film. And it just was kind of like we were dropped off a cliff. It's
Right.
just like, what are we going to
Hmm.
do now?
Right, right. So, when it comes to the show upon rewatch, I really realized, and I really believe this. I talked to Mary about this, and then I had somebody else on to talk about the show. I really feel like it was ahead of its time in several ways, and I think one of the ways is the things that you as a cast were talking about, whether it was race or the legalization of gay marriage or politics in general. These weren't things that were being talked about on other Housewives franchises at the time. It almost took another 10 years, probably honestly, until 2020 when these things really entered the forefront of like the Housewives conversation, I would say. We're
Mhm.
and to me it's a very DC thing to talk about more serious issues as that are connected to politics. Was talking about that stuff on camera and with these women, was that natural for you? Like what when it came to that aspect of filming and engaging on the show, what was that like?
It was very natural. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a part of my everyday life. I've been here since 1977,
Hmm.
and we know that the buck stops here. So it's important to be involved. And yeah, it was a pleasure to meet with David Catania and to really be able to visit him in his office and hear his side of it, and like his take on it, because we lose patience, at least I do sometimes, when it just seems like, well, wait a minute, why do people have to think about that?
Right.
Like, I'm not sure. So he really taught me, in that meeting that day that I needed to have more patience with other people's opinions and be more open to express all the reasons why I feel it should be legalized. But one of my one-liners was, it's overrated. Marriage.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Yeah, and like I mean, even in that part of that episode, it was sort of, your friend, our friend Mary, like she had an initial reaction that was a little bit more hesitant or a little bit more questioning, but then she had this amazing conversation with her daughter, and that to me was such a special moment because all it took was sort of like one comment from her daughter to really shift how she was thinking about it and be like, wait, of course I believe in this. Of course and I thought that was a really cool moment too.
I feel that when Mary said that, she believed it at the time,
Yeah.
but when she stopped to think about it, it was, oh my God, what have I said? Like, of course I understand the need for equality, and gay marriage and all of that. And, it was great that she had the opportunity to come back and explain herself, I'm sure
Yeah.
we all wanted an opportunity to come back and explain
A
ourselves.
rare second
But
chance. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
usually a second and third and fourth season allow a lot to unfold.
that's true.
So that's another, Debbie Downer for not having that opportunity.
Right. So I also think it was ahead of its time because of the big scandal. I mean, the housewives in the years since have had so many big kind of national scandals, honestly, and some of them have also involved the FBI. And it's my belief that production and the network sort of learned how to deal with things like that because of this experience on DC. I really firmly believe that.
A
But
hundred percent.
I also think from the cast perspective, here you were filming this show, it's going to come out the following year at some point, and then all of a sudden this happens, and your show and your cast are thrust into the national spotlight way before you're probably ready for it. I'm curious what that was like for you.
Well, honestly, it was very difficult in that we didn't know where to turn. We didn't know who was going to protect us, how things were going to unfold. I mean, we gathered to talk to one another in our production team. Half Yard Production was a wonderful production company locally in Bethesda, but they had never encountered anything
Right.
like that in their life, and this was their first time out working with Bravo. So they were kind of, as confused and startled as we were that all of these, I mean, they were filming things like Say Yes to the Dress, for goodness sakes,
Right. Low
please.
stakes.
So, and you go from that to Housewives of D.C. So it was startling, and it also was concerning for my business. I felt like, oh my gosh, I've got all these people to protect that we represent, and it just felt like it could be detrimental in a lot of ways. So it was a wait and see.
Right. Right. And Mary told me that you had a phone call the next morning where you were sort of like, I don't know if they'll even continue with this show. We might never make it to air. So what was your reaction when a couple months later you pick cameras back up to watch them on C-SPAN, and that obviously signals to you that they're going to continue on with the show and they'll probably make it to
Right.
air. So what was your reaction to that little moment?
Well, certainly relieved, because after spending 4 months filming, and we involved so many people that were, like Burkina Faso, them doing their fashion show, and being, the third most impoverished nation in Africa. And it's like, that the designer, Claire Lawson Ames, like she stepped forward, let us film, took a risk. So all the people that were involved
Yeah.
in our lives took risk. So, once they picked up the cameras again, there was a relief that, oh my gosh, at least what we filmed so far, however they edit it, will air.
It wasn't for nothing, basically. Yeah.
Wasn't for nothing.
Right. Right. So just generally, I mean, I don't really want to harp on the Salahis, to be honest, but just I know because I also know that you had a history with them. But in general, filming with them, what was it like? I mean, Mary told me that she didn't think that their behavior was really amped up for the cameras, that was sort of just how they were. Is that true from your experience? And kind of going off that, I guess you kind of alluded to this earlier, but do you think how much of what they were doing did you attribute to both of them, just to her, just to him? Just walk me through a little bit of your mindset kind of before we move on from this.
I really blame him so much more than her. Like, I feel that she was somewhat innocent walking into her relationship with him. I feel like he was a con artist
Hmm.
and he kind of brought her into his life. She fell in love with him, borderline abusive mind control.
Yeah.
That's what unfolded in front of me. That's how I felt, whether it's true or not. I was so happy when I was asked to do an interview on MSNBC for Where Is She Now? Because she was missing. You know what I'm
Hmm.
talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe the audience doesn't, but after we stopped filming, shortly after, she made her way out of their home environment and into the arms of her now husband and is very happy. And I am very happy for her.
It's relief.
But I mean, it was, I know Mary talked about this a little bit, that we had talked amongst ourselves about maybe like a little intervention. We certainly extended the olive branch to say, are you okay? Is there something we can do? But I'm just glad she had the strength and the courage to walk out of that.
Yeah, completely, completely. I mean, just as a viewer, I'm curious how much like the show not continuing played into, the dissolution of their marriage. Who knows?
Right.
I don't know if we'll ever know, but I agree. I'm glad she got out of sort of the clutches, his clutches. Um,
Right.
the other sort of aspect of that, Linda, was like it seemed as though, I mean, you had this great friendship with Paul Wharton, and it seemed as though she was almost trying to compete with you over that friendship, and like you obviously seemed very settled in that friendship and not threatened really, but
Right.
that to me felt like a sort of a subplot of the show was that interesting dynamic to me.
Yeah, I think, everything happens organically. I know the audience wonders, are we scripted or that kind of thing? But the night of the Washingtonian Style Setters, and Paul and I were both there, and he told me that he was dressing Michaela. I mean, I sincerely, I try, I'm Southern, I try to make things a little funny, even when they're not. But I'm like, you're going to have to dress her in the children's department. And, that's what started, I think, like it wasn't, it's like I said, it's not scripted. So the moment I gave production that line, they
Hmm.
ran with it.
Right.
And then it was, Paul, because I told him, you need to talk to her. I'm concerned about her weight. And of course, so that created a whole nother,
Yep. Whole thing.
subject.
Right. Right. Are you and Paul still friends? Do you still see him in DC?
Love him. Love
Good.
him. Definitely. I mean, he's been between London and DC for, I think the last couple of years, but we saw each other, I think in October. He took me out to Peacock Cafe, one of our
A
little beach towns,
favorite. Yeah.
for my birthday. That was in September, but we celebrated, and we're both just crazy busy, but we'll see each other socially
I
and
love that.
really.
Love that. The
Yeah.
other thing that Mary told me was that, after the season wrapped, you kind of as a cast were a united front on really not wanting to work with them, not wanting to go down that road. You shot the cast photo separately. She was photoshopped in. Security was hired at your behest for the reunion because you had to be in the same place as them. I think there was a moment maybe on like a press tour stop or something that was alluded to in the reunion. So, were all those things just to sort of like, again, just protect and keep them at arm's length?
When we were doing the upfronts, everything was great.
Mm,
Like there was no security, everybody was participating. Um, it was on the eve of one of our longest days doing press that Tark came after one of Bravo's PR people. And I was sitting at the end of the table with Kat because at midnight it was going to be Kat's birthday and we just couldn't wait to like go celebrate. And I watched him come over the table. There was like 12 of us sitting at this table. And he went right for this woman.
mm,
And I can't take that. I mean, I'm
no,
little, but there is no way in God's green earth I am going to watch a man do that. And so I screamed at him. Like, I was like, Tar, like, bring it down. Like, what are you doing? And that's when he threw the red wine at me. And, you know, um, I threw a glass of water back at him, but I had the glass in hand. But the thing is, it was at that point in time, I saw him shove Mikhail. I saw him go after these women. And I
mm,
thought, you know what? This guy is not somebody to be trusted as far as like being in his presence. He was just a loose cannon. So
dangerous
I felt like we needed, from that point on, there was no way that we were going to go forward without them being in separate rooms. I mean, Mikhail could have been with us, but
but
not
she didn't do
him.
anything without him. She
She
didn't do anything
wouldn't
without him.
go anywhere without him.
Right,
So that created the need for security and the
right.
need for separate green rooms and whatever, green screens. And yeah, thank God they have the ability technically to make all that happen. But
There
that
we go.
was, and at that
That's
point,
dark. Yeah,
everything was pretty clear that there was more there than the audience was ever going to see.
for sure, for sure. So obviously you saw Mary at the Andy event. You guys are still close friends.
Yes.
I think you still at least text with Kat. When was the last time you saw or spoke to your co-stars?
Well, I talked to Kat about 2 days ago, and she is so funny. I have to tell
Hmm.
you, like, she definitely needed subtitles. So that was hilarious, but she's a riot. She's living in Spain. She's, flipping projects with design and she's very happy. She has a daughter, Zara. She had the two daughters on the
Yeah.
show, Jade and Ruby, but Zara is, I think, 11 years old now.
Wow.
It's so crazy.
Wow.
But,
Wow.
when I just talked to Mary,
And then Stacy, you haven't been in contact with.
I think Stacy just wanted out. Like
Yeah.
she just didn't want any part of what was going forward. And she and I had never been friends before. Her children were much younger. Our lives, what we had in common is that we were both business women. But, it just, yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't. When I see her in person, like if I run into her, which I haven't for years, my heart lights up, and
Yeah.
I'm
She seems like an amazing woman,
hugging.
but maybe not like, made for the
Yeah,
show.
I
Right.
mean,
Exactly.
we just haven't seen each other. I've seen Jason at events, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I love Stacy. I don't think that she, wanted to
Continue.
continue the housewife, group.
Which, more power to her.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
and then Linda, I talked to Mary about this, but it was interesting several years after, DC was not brought back. Bravo brings on the Real Housewives of Potomac, which is obviously Potomac is a suburb of DC, but the women sort of live all around the area. And to me, it's sort of a de facto DC housewives, DMV housewives, if you will. What was your
Hmm.
reaction to that news that there was another housewives coming back, just sort of in a different way?
Bittersweet.
Yeah.
I was disappointed for us, but I was super happy for our city because I felt like by being canceled, we missed an opportunity to show parts of our city that wouldn't be shown otherwise, you know? So I thought the cast was great. And I used to live in Potomac, so I
Hmm.
was, oh, rah, rah for that.
Love it.
And yeah, so I'm really happy for them and they've done a great job.
Right. Totally. When you think about Real Housewives of DC, the only one season franchise ahead of its time, made a huge splash. What do you think or hope the legacy of your show is?
I hope that the legacy is that there is so much more in DC than just politics, lawyers, and lobbyists. There's a whole city here of restaurants and real estate and an industry like mine. One of the reasons that they really wanted me on the show was because who could believe that there is fashion in DC?
Hmm.
And our industry was showcased and that was incredible. So I hope that the legacy of our show is that there are multi layers of DC beyond the right and the left.
Yeah, and I think the show accomplished that, especially as a reflection of the beginning of the Obama years. I think it's a total reflection of that time, which was a really exciting time to be in DC, you know?
Oh, it still is. I mean,
Yeah,
it's jumping. It's crazy.
good, good.
Yeah.
Well, Linda, is there anything else you wanted to talk about the show? Because I feel like we've covered most of our bases.
I know, and I was so happy to hear Mary's interview because I felt like, well, first of all, she always does a great job, and she really touched on so many valuable points. But I'm thrilled to be back. I'm thrilled that Peacock is streaming our show, and every day I talk to somebody who's like, I watched it again, or I got to watch it for the first time because the great thing about streaming is you can watch it at your convenience.
Yes.
And if you miss it, I mean, most people weren't going on and buying it on iTunes or whatever, where they were selling it. And that, just being able to have the full series plus the reunion, because when we did our 10-year anniversary with Bravo, and they sent us, little promo pieces and
Uh-huh.
said, where are they now? That was great, but they didn't show the reunions.
So interesting.
And so there was no closure. There was like
Hmm.
all this, open-ended, what the heck happened? So I think that having Peacock streaming and where people have access to it at their convenience, and also being able to watch that reunion, which remained in the top 5 for many years, even though our show was canceled.
It's
So
amazing. Yeah,
yeah, it was great.
and I think Linda, like, I'm very tapped into sort of the online world around these shows, and there are so many people that either came of age a little bit later or just kind of discovered Housewives a little bit later after DC had been on the air. And a lot of people want to be sort of like completists when it comes to Housewives. They want to see every season of every franchise, and DC was sort of this black box for a while because it was hard to access it. You really had to try. So I think that I would presume that you will experience this for kind of just like going forward, people discovering you in the show because it's there. It's finally there now. And I think that's an exciting prospect, I think.
So exciting. So I
Yeah,
just look forward to what, just continuing to live my life and watch what happens live.
there we go. Well, Lynda Erikiletian, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. This is so fun to connect with you. And I hope to run into you in the hood sometime soon in Georgetown.
Come and see us tomorrow night.
If I'm in New York, I'm in New York, but next time I'm in DC,
Oh, that's right. Oh my
yeah.
God. Well, come and visit your mom and see us. Say
Oh, I will.
hello.
I will next time I'm in town. I will.
So nice to meet you.
You too.
And thank you.
Thank you for doing this. Yep. I want to gab.